According to the reports, a particular group of frost wyverns, renowned for coming all the way from a lower realm, made their entrance into the Wyvernoid kingdom but were refused entry due to having amidst them the Accursed One, she said, her gaze drifting to Isha in his arms. The last place they were seen was in the Eviolurnian kingdom, where they seemed to have been restocking their spacecraft, she added, and Ryuk nodded, saying, I have more questions, but for now that can wait. You, he pointed to the one who had just spoken. You will follow me in search of them. Preposterous. The others immediately roared out, but they were silenced when the one who had been pointed out raised her hand, her words slicing the air. I will leave with him in search of them, she said, leading to the others turning their shocked gazes upon her. Then her words echoed telephatically in their minds. He's a massive danger being here. Even if we can resist him in a fight, half the kingdom will be laid to waste by him, she said, leading to the others furrowing their brows in thought. This is a chance to lead him away from here, and while he's gone, you three focus on awakening the ancients. Only they can deal with him without bringing destruction upon the kingdom. I will keep him away long enough for you to awaken the ancients, she said. But what if he? The others tried to argue, but were silenced. Whatever he does to me will be nothing compared to the millions of lives that will be lost trying to refuse him. Eldori already fell in his hands. There's no need for millions too if only one more person has to fall. Besides, now that I have a glimpse of his power, I know how to protect myself from death. Though the conversation appeared long, it happened within the span of 3 seconds, and Ryuk watched as the woman stepped out. She snapped her fingers, and the wyvern who had whispered the information to her ear rose up after her as they approached Ryuk. Let's leave now before they move too far, she said to him, snapping her fingers again, and Ryuk watched as the messenger transformed. From a crouching man seemingly in his early 30s, he changed, becoming a hulking 7-meter snow wyvern with 4 gigantic wings. Ryuk landed behind him, along with the lady, and the wings flapped as they soared forward with speed, soon disappearing from the royalties area of the kingdom. The second they disappeared, the order rang out through the skies. Prepare to awaken the ancients. Prepare for war. You've grown stronger. The words echoed from beneath as Ryuk turned his head downwards, brushing his hands to straighten her roughened hair. You've become warmer than I remembered, he replied to Isha. Really, Isha had turned warm, which was quite strange, since she was a frost wyvern known for her freezing cold nature. I exhausted my core, she replied, whilst grabbing his hand and placing it upon her chest. He could feel the cold faintly pumping, but unfortunately, it was the only place where the cold remained, and it could be barely felt. I'm sorry for being so far away, he whispered, and she shook her head. It's not your fault at all. I'm the one who should have been stronger, she said, as Ryuk hummed silently for a while before asking, Do you still wish to be, or? He saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes, which she forced down with a smile as she asked, Or what? But all he did was silently stare at her. You can feel even that? She asked, and he nodded. Yes, I feel your weariness. You're tired, he said, and she smiled softly. My reason has always been to grow stronger to protect you, she said. But now that I think about it, ironically, only the contrary ever happens. If I keep growing and cannot even achieve the thing I want the most, then I don't see a reason to keep growing anymore. I don't want to have you protect me, Ryuk replied, watching her pause at his words. I am the one to protect you, so it was never ironic that what was supposed to happen is what is happening. If I can't protect you and I'm not here to protect you, essentially being useless then, she said, then why do you have me at all? Why go through all the headaches to free me and get rid of my troubles? Again and again, just to be paid with nothing. You're useful. In what way? Your existence, Ryuk replied. It gave me a reason to come this far. That's just you being nice. Again, she whispered, looking away from him. Her soul has grown wearier. The system panel flashed, and Ryuk hummed. an idea suddenly popping in his head. One moment he raised his hand and then, snap! His fingers snapped, and the world all of a sudden fell into complete darkness. Deep darkness that completely blinded Isha, leaving nothing but the feeling of being cradled by him. "Imagine it like the dark, Isha," he said, and all of a sudden, she felt a flicker in the distance. She turned her head. It was like she could see the light far in the distance, but somehow it was dark. Too dark for her to really pinpoint the exact location of the light. "There's always an end to the tunnel, like a light in the dark, Isha. You might not see it immediately, but I trust you can feel it," he said as she meekly nodded. "If you try to get up and search for it in such darkness, it will be too hard. You'll wander aimlessly and endlessly, waste so much time, and in the end, you might just get lost in the darkness." Right then, something flashed right above her, and she turned to find Ryuk, his face illuminated by the light from an object which he held in his hand. "But if you have a lantern in your hands," he said, stretching his hand to the side as the lantern illuminated the distance, and Isha could see it clearly now. A clear path to the light in the distance. It will let you see the path ahead clearly, and it acts not just to help you find the exit, but it gives you a reason to keep going. It's like a source of energy that, so far it keeps running. You'll have enough energy to keep going in search of the light at the end. At this point, her eyebrows creased in a moment of new realization. "And you know what happens if halfway through the lantern suddenly goes off?" he said, flinging the lantern away. It died off, leaving everything to fall into deep darkness once more. "The path is lost," Isha whispered. "And so is the reason to continue," he added. Snap! He snapped his hands once more, and the darkness faded away like it was but an illusion, returning reality to its original state. "So that is what I am to you. The lamp?" Isha whispered beneath her breath, and Ryuk nodded. "That's correct. You feel like you don't have much use because you're unable to protect me. But if you really think about it, the lamp was never the one to literally carry me forward through the darkness. That was the duty of the legs, which correlates to my own personal strength. And remember, without the lamp, no matter how strong the legs, they are more or less useless. Don't bring yourself down for me. You're too strong to ever get lost," she said, though a faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "It's just the truth. So, if I may reframe my earlier question, do you still wish to be bright, or even brighter than ever before?" Ryuk asked, watching as her eyelids closed. Her brows creased slightly, as if she were fighting her own thoughts, but in the end they settled. Her lips parted, sucking in a deep breath before she exhaled. When she opened her eyes again, things were different. Her eyes, once dull and lifeless, had regained their light. Silvery dots twinkled within them as the lost aura around her faded away. She rose from his hold, leaping over him as her bright silver eyes blinked. "Yes, I am." She got over it quite fast. "Impressive." The system blinked at Ryuk, who silently exhaled in relief. "Then I have just the thing," he said, and in the next moment, something appeared in his hands. What? Isha had yet to fully register it before the object zipped into her lips with blinding speed. She clutched her throat to stop it, but it bypassed easily, traveling down and settling in her stomach. "What was that?" she asked, looking at Ryuk. "An evolution pill." The next moment, she felt her head spin, the world blurring as she collapsed into his arms, losing consciousness. -1 Beast Evolution card used. Total evolution cards left. 9. "I wonder what you'll look like after this," he muttered to himself, rising with Isha in his arms. With a single thought, the space before him rippled, leading to an opening. He prepared to step into it but stopped slightly, turning his gaze toward the woman seated silently on the wyvern. "Wait here. I'll be back." She patted the frost wyvern on its back, causing it to pause. The second it did, he stepped through the portal, which immediately zipped shut behind him. When Ryuk reappeared, he found himself in a valley of red roses and blue lilies, a refreshing breeze rustling through the garden and faintly flapping his clothes. But he wasn't alone. At the side of the garden lay a lady on the ground, both hands behind her head, a blue lily tucked between her lips. She was buried in a small hill of tentacles that shone with brilliant purple light, and one of her eyelids lifted, staring lazily at Ryuk. "You're back so soon," Zafir said, and Ryuk rolled his eyes. "So soon? It's been more than 20 hours since then." Zafir shrugged. "Really? Felt like only a minute passed." She buried herself deeper into her tentacles with a sigh of relief. Ah! It was immediately clear. This truly was a beast's haven. Zafir turned when she noticed the girl in Ryuk's arms, watching as he lowered her gently to the ground, resting her against the tree. "And that is?" she asked curiously, flashing to his side in an instant. "Isha," he replied as he rose to his feet. "Is she?" Zafir probed. Ryuk nodded. "Yes, Isha is my first contracted pet. She looks so beautiful." Ryuk watched silently as a frostflake tattoo appeared on Isha's chest, spreading across her arms and releasing a stream of cold mist that gathered around her. 5 seconds later, Isha was completely enveloped, with the mist realigning to form a cocoon of ice that sealed her within. Zafir hummed at the bizarre change. "Isha is currently evolving, and the cocoon is to protect her from outside interference. I brought her here because I'm sure this should be the best place for her to undergo it," he explained lengthily, watching Zafir shrug and returning to her lounging position. "I don't care about her, so I can't be bothered to waste time interrupting." He furrowed his brows slightly at her, something Zafir didn't fail to notice. "TSK, you don't even trust me," she scoffed, and he rolled his eyes. A moment later, the space rippled once more as he stepped out of the garden. It left just Zafir and Isha, and the second it left just the two, Zafir moved, appearing before the cocoon. She moved closer, for purple eyes studying the lady within. A strange feeling stirred in her chest. Her hand lifted, fingers inching toward the icy barrier, but they halt just a short distance from actually touching it. "I guess that can wait until she's awake," she muttered, retreating to her lounging position. I expected at least that much curiosity. Sitting on the wyvern's back with his arms crossed, Ryuk held a small orb in his palm, and right now it was playing exactly what was going on in the realm. He has seen everything, leading him to smile faintly as the orb vanished from his hand. With Isha's own personal issues resolved, I can finally focus on the other important matters, he muttered, turning a serious gaze to the woman seated on the frost wyvern. "The Eviolurnian kingdom is now less than an hour away," she said to Ryuk, who hummed before he asked. "You mentioned them being sent away due to having with them the possession of the Accursed One," he said, watching her eyebrows furrowed. "You're going to appear before Selene Nagas, apologize for your unreasonable and foolish actions, and present her with an exclusive invitation back to the kingdom, along with special benefits to make it clear just how sorry you are for the injustice they suffered." "You!" Nerys was about to curse in anger when she was spoken to so coldly. She had watched his entire exchange with that pet of his, how gently he spoke to her, how carefully he chose his words, and how beautifully he explained to her what she meant to him. And now, he had suddenly switched completely, calling her dumb and being so commanding. She was no stranger to being spoken to rudely before, but his words, which should have been nothing, surprisingly stung hard. When Ryuk turned to her, his eyes had undergone the same change as his voice. Cold and commanding. "That's no way to speak to a woman," she forced out, though her voice came out lower than she had planned. Ryuk simply stared until she eventually sighed. "I guess I can make that happen," she said at last. "Good." Her palms opened, and a special runic paper appeared in her hands as she began writing down the invitation. The writing didn't take Nerys long, barely 30 seconds. She was about to store it away when the invitation vanished, appearing before Ryuk. He grabbed it and began reading, his expression rapidly contorting just a few seconds into the read. A glint flashed in his eyes before he spoke. "What's with the high and mighty tone?" he asked as her brows quivered. High and mighty? You made it sound like them coming back is some divine blessing from you, when it's supposed to be you acknowledging how you wronged them and pleading for their return. His hand burst into white flames, burning the invitation to ashes. You have 3 chances to write something good, and you've wasted one. Rewrite, he ordered. Her eyes hardened from having her buttons being pushed repeatedly, but his coldness didn't thaw. In the end, she could only bring out another card and begin scribbling. When she lifted her pen, Ryuk snatched it up and read it, but not even 3 seconds passed before it, too, turned to ashes. Trash. Rewrite. I write how I'm supposed to write. I'm the professional here, not your brute head, she cursed. This is your last chance, Ryuk repeated, deaf to her words. Tsh. She clicked her tongue. The frost wyvern they rode on suddenly paused. A deep voice rumbled out. Maybe I should do it, Wyvern Nerys, the frost wyvern called. Nerys furrowed her brows as the creature shifted form, becoming a man who looked to be in his 50s. He grabbed the invitation card and pen, then began writing. 5 minutes later, Ryuk took it and read. This time, a glint crossed his eyes, and he turned to look at the wyvern man and nodded. You speak quite well, he complimented, a flicker of surprise flickering in the man's eyes, when he noticed the underlying genuineness and amazement. Unfortunate you're tied down with an incompetent like her, he murmured under his breath. Nerys' face turned red with anger. She's still learning, the old wyvern replied with a slight chuckle before shifting back into his true form as they continued their flight. But Nerys wasn't done. How am I incompetent? She demanded. Ryuk shrugged. The first letter dripped with pride. The second one was fake. Fake. It was like you had a gun to your head while being forced to write. One read, and even a blind person could tell it isn't genuine. Well, of course I'm forced, she protested. But the old wyvern spoke up before things could blow over. If I may speak, Wyvern Nerys. She tapped his back twice, granting permission. The reason you couldn't write a satisfactory invitation is because of one thing, he said. What is it? She asked, frowning. Your inability to feel, he said simply. She blinked, lost. To write anything at all starts from a place of feeling. If you wish to plead with people and send an invitation, you must first feel their pain. They were a group who came from a faraway place, such as the lower realm. Naturally, they must have faced life-threatening situations, and their journey was definitely far from smooth. To survive, they must not only be powerful but also believe. The belief that their suffering will be worth it in the end. And all of that just to be refused at the gate because among them was a single person the kingdom wouldn't allow, he said, and Nerys cut him off. The kingdom's decision was fair, she said firmly. They brought in the accursed one. If they'd been allowed to stay, they might have turned bitter or even tried to rescue her, bringing nothing but woe upon themselves, she argued. The old wyvern nodded. Your words have reason, Wyvern Nerys, and I am completely behind your view. But whether it was fair or not, if you find yourself in a position where you have to plead with them, you must first feel their suffering. From that feeling, you lay your pen to the note. If you don't, your result will either come out too authoritative, because of your personal standing, or too forced. He did not say anything more after this, but it hit Nerys. Feel. She had never once considered the pain they went through to travel all the way from the lower realm to the upper realm. Neither had she considered the pain they must have felt when they were refused entrance at the gate. Even if the kingdom's decision was fair, that didn't erase the hardship they endured. How could she plead with them if she never even thought of that at all? I understand, she muttered under her breath. Her gaze drifted to Ryuk, who remained sitting, with his back turned to her, staring at the distant stars. And you said the second invitation was too forced. So, I'm guessing you don't want them to know you're the one behind their return, she asked. Ryuk simply shrugged, ignoring her. Acting behind the shadows, even if it appears good, doesn't that just make you hypocritical? Whatever, he said, turning his attention to the old wyvern they rode. "You seem a lot more competent, so I wish to discuss things with you," he added. "He listens to me, and you cannot talk with him unless I allow it," Nerys replied, but in the next moment, her face changed as a claw clamped around her neck, lifting her into the air. So fast. The realization hit, her eyes widening as the death squeeze tightened around her throat. Her hands shifted to claws, clawing at Ryuk's hand, but they did nothing. He spoke coldly. "Just because we sit 2 meters apart doesn't mean we're familiar. The only reason you still draw breath is because I have one last use for you." Droplets of blood rolled across his claw as they dug deeper into her neck. "Annoy me enough, and I'll find another way to accomplish my goal. Without you," he spat out before releasing her. She collapsed to her knees, coughing blood from her lips. Ryuk turned away, moving directly to the wyvern's head. With a pink aura undulating on his right palm, he pressed it against the back of the wyvern's head, communicating telepathically. The exchange lasted nearly 20 minutes before Ryuk withdrew his hand, leaving the old wyvern's brows creased in thought at the end. Ryuk said nothing more. They were already approaching a massive world in the distance, and with a quick scan, he found Elder Selene amongst the crowd of different beastly races. "There she is," he told the old wyvern, pointing straight at her. The wyvern nodded in understanding, and Ryuk floated off its back as the frost wyvern continued on its journey, carrying with it its master. "What did he talk to you about, Molayne?" Nerys asked through clenched teeth, her anger sharpening as she noticed Molayne pause, then return to his humanoid form despite her giving no permission. In that form he turned, locking eyes with her. "For your sake and for wyvernoid wyvern Nerys, I beseech you with my life core to let go of the hate in your heart, and carry out the task we've been given to the best of your ability." His words more than surprised Nerys. A frost wyvern's life core was no trivial thing to invoke. It was the highest vow, a frost wyvern laying down its pride and dignity. The anger in her heart faltered as she looked at Molayne and whispered, "Do you say this out of fear of him, even knowing the ancients will awaken soon?" He softly shook his head. "I say this so you do not lose your life. Please let go of the hate and focus on the mission. Nothing under heaven or earth will stop him if he chooses to rid us both of life." "I came prepared to die," Nerys said, but her shoulder was suddenly gripped tightly by Molayne. "A death like this serves no purpose. You've come too far to meet your end when it can be avoided so easily by you simply dropping your ego," he said. Her eyes furrowed instead at his hand on her shoulder, making him withdraw them, but right then and there, a pink halo flashed in Molayne's eyes, his usual subdued expression warping into a bizarre grin. "I am him and he is me." "You!" Nerys shouted, stepping back in shock, only to watch the grin fade and the pink halo in Molayne's eyes vanish. "Is something wrong, wyvern Nerys?" Molayne asked, eyeing her cautious stance. She stared at him blankly for a long while. "Don't tell me he. In the end, she could only sigh silently before asking, "What's the plan?" "They're preparing for war against you. Something about awakening the ancients amongst them." The panel flashed before Ryuk's gaze. He stood in the dark void, his eyes spanning the entirety of the Eviolurnian kingdom. "I know. And you still plan to go back there," it said. "Yes, I do. I feel this is beyond just fighting for Elder Selene's justice." The system panel blinked as Ryuk almost choked on his breath. "Me? Fighting for justice? Then what warrants taking all these risks? I thought it was because you felt Elder Selene was denied entrance wrongfully?" It pressed him, but Ryuk kept his gaze on the void, eyes settling on them. "I don't fight for justice. I don't believe in it. If justice existed, I wouldn't be here at all," he said coldly. "What I fight for is pain and hardship. Elder Selene has come too far just to be refused at the gate. For over 200 years on Endearth, she spent time and resources planning for this journey. And on this journey, She brushed shoulders with death countless times, barely surviving. All just to be told no, because of Isha's existence as the accursed one, whatever that even meant. My answer to this was no, and hence why this is happening. Why no? Why no? Because there's been too much pain in this journey to be denied. That's what I fight for, Ryuk explained at length. I made sure she never knew I was the one behind it. If she did, she might not feel comfortable being here, knowing it was only thanks to me that they were allowed in or creating a feeling of indebtedness in her heart. That's why I kept that lousy woman around. With her presence as one of the they, Selene would feel more at ease. And that old wyvern seemed wise enough. He'll at least help them integrate into this place very well, he muttered. She will still want to know what happened to Isha, though, the system remarked, and Ryuk nodded. I already told the old wyvern to give her the truth. She was taken by a man named Ryuk, and they left the kingdom. I left a cryptic message so she'd know it was true. So, ignorance is bliss, huh? Ignorance is bliss? Ryuk muttered, his brows creasing for a while, but then they relaxed. Yes. Sometimes, I guess. Silently, Ryuk remained, sharing a strand of his consciousness with Molayne. He watched the interaction with Elder Selene, exhaling in relief when things went exactly as he had wanted. Even though she showed surprise, the two acted convincingly enough, and in a moment she agreed, asking for a couple of hours to prepare for the journey. I'll eventually have to pay her a visit sometime, but for now, there are other things that need to be done. The first of those was making sure that when she integrated into the Wyvernoid Kingdom, she'd be given no trouble. To do that, there was only one way, the hard way. A silent ripple spread, and the void seemed suddenly splashed by white ink. Less than 10 seconds later, Ryuk was standing once more above the world of the Wyvernoid Kingdom. A distance the old Wyvernoid had spent hours flying was crossed by him in just 10 seconds. He had not spent a minute above the Wyvernoid Kingdom's airspace when a total of 3 gates appeared before him. They were white in color, weirdly covered in white scales, and inscribed with ever-changing ancient runes. Creak. They made an old, creaking noise as they opened, and figures stepped out as the gates disappeared. There were 3 of them, one from each gate, and their sight made Ryuk's brows furrow. These beings were strange. It wasn't only that they were all female, but that they seemed to be the embodiment of runic tattoos. Across every inch of their exposed, scaly skin, runic markings twisted and shifted, sending ripples of silvery white aura into the air. What's more, although their tattoos looked similar, each of them radiated a distinctly different aura. One look and Ryuk could tell. The trio were beings of supreme power. Ancients of the Frost Wyverns, huh? He voiced out, cracking his shoulders and neck. It was already getting boring fighting those I knew were dead talkers anyway. Maybe you all will be more of a challenge. He voiced out, but a voice echoed faster before he could begin morphing. What do you want? The tallest among the women spoke. Her eyes were wrapped in a blindfold covered in runes as she regarded Ryuk, who paused before replying. Did they wake you up and not tell you why? That's strange. She continued. The young ones mentioned you arrived unannounced, with the imprisoned accursed one in your arms. You took over the minds of hundreds of thousands of lesser wyverns and stormed the royal place, killing one of the 5 orders for failing to answer a question of yours. She recited, and he helped her finish. So to righteously protect themselves, they woke you 3 ancients to get rid of this evil tyrannical invader, and now we all engage in combat, the end of it being you die or I do, he completed. Their narration, though seemingly true, lacks something important. One of them, the one to his right, said, her voice softer and younger, most of her facial features hidden behind a mask made of flickering ancient symbols. What was your aim with all your tyrannical behavior? If you indeed have a deeper relationship with the accursed one, it would make sense why you helped her escape imprisonment. But why attack the royal city afterward? Do you fight for revenge? Or is there a much deeper aim you wish to accomplish? She asked, staring silently at Ryuk, who paused for a while. So, you don't wish to cross weapons right away? Interesting, he muttered before his brows steeled. If they were willing to talk, he'd return it in equal measure. My aim is too and simple, really, he began. The first, you might have heard. A certain group was refused entry due to them bringing in the Accursed One. I do not accept that, so I plan on bringing them back and making sure they stay, whether your kingdom likes it or not, he said as they remained silent. But of course, this is easier said than done. After all, it isn't my kingdom, is it? Even if I bring them in, they can just be sent away at the gate once more, or this time even imprisoned like you did to the Accursed One, he added. That brings a need for me to dissuade you from forcefully sending them away, and to convince you to listen to my wish to make this group stay here peacefully like any other frost wyvern. Begging, of course, won't do anything, Ryuk said in an obviously tone. I've learned the only thing you frost wyverns seem to respond to is fear. So I aim to cast fear. So much fear that the thought of even laying a hand upon this group I want to stay here is enough to make any of you faint in horror. The trio's eyes furrowed as his lips split into a devilish parting, draconic maws pushing out only to fade back into his cheeks when Ryuk's hands brushed them away. So yes, that's my aim, he completed. And speaking of fear, what better way to send it than by killing the three ancients that the entire kingdom casts their hopes upon? He added, fingers crossing slightly. We cannot be killed by the likes of you, the last one among them, the one who was significantly different due to a single white wing dangling from behind her even in humanoid form, spoke, and Ryuk's grin widened brilliantly. Every single person that has died at my hands believed they couldn't in one way or another. In fact, that phrase now seems like a sure way to tell me I've already won. Ryuk said this, but before things could escalate, the blindfolded one raised her hands, dispelling the looming pressure, and she uttered, You spoke the truth, she told Ryuk, who paused. Your aim truly is simple, and it is not to cast fear, but simply to make sure a group you want in the Wyvernoid Kingdom stays in the Wyvernoid Kingdom. It's as simple as that. If that is your aim, then a fight is useless. Fear itself is not absolute. Eventually, it only turns to hate, and that will destroy the ones you wish to have here. She's quite intelligent. So, instead of exchanging blows and destroying lives now and in the future, why not have the kingdom give you a divine oath instead? She asked as Ryuk's eyebrows creased. A divine oath? It is a promise ritual that must not be broken, she explained, her hands pulling together into a seal-like triangular formation. If all you want is a group you want to have here remain, then it's foolish to risk lives fighting for what is the norm. So, instead of a fight, we give you a promise against our fate. Failure to fulfill this promise leads to the diminishing of fate, a concept so destructive to any being you cannot even begin to imagine, she said. The system panel blinked right after. A divine oath is the advance of a contract grimoire. While it's in a way a deal tool, it is also not a deal since only one person, the one who makes the promise, is affected. The promise is simple. The group that you want to have here will remain here and be allowed to stay like any wyvern group that comes in. Nothing more, nothing less, she announced, and in the next instant, the middle of their triangular seal began to glow with a golden light that bloomed, forming a tiny cube of gold. Each cube of gold moved out of its seal, coming together in between them and conjoining into a single cube. The cube's light reflected on Ryuk for a few seconds before the cube itself disappeared into the void. The promise has been made, the one-winged one said, continuing. The earlier you're out of our kingdom, the better. So what is your second aim? Ryuk paused slightly with a creased eyebrow before speaking. It's a question about Isha. Why is she referred to as the Accursed One, and also, he said, pausing before he spoke, where are Isha's parents? This time, the three remained quiet. A deep silence stretched on for nearly a minute, yet it felt as if years had passed between them. He could not see their expression, but he could sense things, the subtle shift in their otherwise normally stable aura. It was clear they were greatly affected by the question. No one but a frost wyvern deserves to know its deepest secrets. Hence, you do not deserve an answer, the one-winged one said, as fiery as ever. So, her background isn't simple, is it? If anything, it's far from it. You seem to know quite a bit already, said the one wearing a mask of runes, her gaze fixed on Ryuk. I don't know anything, Ryuk replied, except that Isha's parents must be related in some way to some powerful draconic beings. Your bond with Isha is clear, the blindfolded one said. You have fused with her in a soul fusion, and the bond is deep as a familial one, meaning you most likely fused with her right out of her egg. How did you get her in the first place? She said, and just before she answered, the masked one uttered, If you lie to us as an answer, you will get a lie in return. She said, as the words Ryuk was about to utter paused. I was given to her by my uncle. And where is your uncle now? He's late. And what race is this uncle of yours? I don't know, Ryuk said, a vein soon popping out of his temple. And I won't advise you to keep talking about him. And why is that? They asked, only for one more vein to sneak out of Ryuk's face. I said stop. He made it clear, and they paused for a while before a sigh left the lips of the blindfolded one. Amongst them, she seemed the coolest headed. You will know as much as any frost wyvern will be allowed to know. Her words did not bring any arguments from the one who had initially tried to refuse him. Instead, they took a step back, the white door appearing out of the void, but this time there was a fourth door. They didn't say much, disappearing into their doors while leaving the last one alone, seemingly in wait for Ryuk. When they were gone, Ryuk crouched onto his knees, his hands all of a sudden shifting into claws as they held his knee tightly. He raised his head, and it had turned half draconic, scales all over, with a maw exhaling thick white smoke, and eyes burning with blue light. I almost lost it. Speaking about Uncle Bob was something he had never done to others, even though he meant the entire world to him. But having to speak of him in what seemed like a forceful interrogation left him feeling a maddening anger that he could barely contain. The scales receded from his face, his maw folding back into flesh, for the second time now. He straightened, letting out a faint exhale. I just need to hold it back. Just for some more time, he thought, moving towards the white door. It opened up for him, and Ryuk disappeared into it, resulting in its fading. Unbeknownst to Ryuk, exactly 700,000 miles away, a colossal spaceship drifted in the void. Upon its surface stood a man with flowing white hair, and in his eyes, runes that crisscrossed in perfect symmetry only to shatter and reform again. He had witnessed the entire exchange, and his lips curved into a wicked grin as he spoke. We finally found him. The place he was in seemed to be some type of hall, one hellishly long and massive. Dark it was, but all around there floated silvery white motes of light that brought illumination upon the surroundings. This is the ancestral hall of the Frost Wyverns. The words echoed out as Ryuk turned to the side and found her standing. Instead of three, there was just a single person before him, and it was none other than the blindfolded woman who stepped forward through the hall. It holds the history of everything the Frost Wyvern had ever been, and through it we can predict all that we Frost Wyverns will ever be. The hall was lined with statues and murals, filling every corner with their presence. The Frost Wyverns were already gigantic creatures, and their statues were made even bigger. Some random places in the halls had altars, with some having drops of blood floating over them, while some had a wyvernoid tooth or other pieces. The deeper they went into the hall, the fewer the statues and murals. Those whose statues stand here, in one way or another, contributed to changing the fate of us Frost Wyverns for the better. The ones who have contributed the most are given the status of royalty, something that is passed on to their offspring even after their deaths, she explained, and a glint crossed through Ryuk's eyes. He had thought it weird that the Wyvernoid kingdom was divided into two sides, the commoners and the royals, even though, apart from a more refined aura of the royals, he didn't see that much difference. But now he understood. The one who has contributed the most is the most royal of all royalties. And since the history of Frost Wyverns, there has only been one such person deserving of that title, she said, coming to a pause. Coincidentally, They both arrived at the end of the hall. In this place, there was no other statue around. Just a single statue, one of a humongous six-winged frost wyvern, and on her head an equally gigantic crown. But what was more was behind this frost. It depicted someone else. A feminine figure standing atop this frost wyvern like its rider. The entire statue was covered in bizarre dark cracks that radiated smoke of pitch-black fog from its depths, giving it a cursed appearance. Her name was Isolde. The blindfolded woman forced out as Ryuk stood silently before the statue. At a time when the world was more chaotic than ever, she stood as an unwavering pillar for the frost wyverns. Her scars earned her the name Isolde, Queen of Winged Frost, and though a frost wyvern, she held power greater than even the mighty frost dragons. What became of her in the end? He asked, as a result of her cursed appearance. One choice destroyed everything she built. Her loyalty, she explained as Ryuk's brows creased. We frost wyverns do not love or welcome the idea of being fused with other races. We're an independent race that loves freedom more than life itself, making most of us remain loyal only to ourselves. Isolde was different. She chose to form a bond, and in a war that had nothing to do with us frost wyverns, one far beyond our very existence, she remained loyal to that bond, to the hurricane who waged it. The woman explained as Ryuk listened silently. If all she had done was walk herself into that war and never returned, she, of course, would have been praised as a righteous, loyal hero, but no. Before the war, Isolde gave an order that 99% of the frost wyverns opposed, yet were forced to obey. And in that single war, half of the mightiest among us fell in battle, she narrated as Ryuk's heart jumped a bit. She didn't just get herself destroyed. She dragged down so many royalties with her. A foolish move that cost us frost wyverns so much. Her name, which had once become an illumination, died overnight, and she became referred to as Isolde, the light accursed. Just like royalties, the deeds of frost wyverns are passed on to their generations. And this is where she comes in, Isha, she explained, but Ryuk could already pick up the clues. Isha is Isolde's offspring? Ryuk muttered, only to be corrected. Her daughter. Isolde was pregnant with one before the war. We all thought verily she must have died with her, but who would have thought? The woman mused under her breath before she continued. When a frost wyvern appears before the gate, their ancestor blessing is recognized, and they will be given either the royalty identification or the commoner identification. When Isha came in, her identification was immediately different, and that was how she was recognized to have a familial link with the accursed, hence her imprisonment. I understand it all now. You said your uncle gave you her egg. Then he must have been in that war or in a way be linked to it. But according to sources, none who went into that war survived or were ever seen again. So how had he done it? The lady probed, but Ryuk's eyes locked onto her figure instead. The figure of the one who rode upon the frost wyvern. Her, he called out. What is her name? He asked, and the woman had her brows creased, though her eyes remained hidden behind the blindfold. She replied, No frost wyvern knows her name except for Isolde. All we know is that she's a true dragon. One of the most powerful there could be, she said, and Ryuk hummed silently, giving one last look at the statue before he turned. I have all I want, so I'll take my leave now. The straightforwardness made her pause as she looked at his disappearing back. She thought he would have asked or said more. Said it was unfair for Isha to have been imprisoned due to the simple ties she had with someone. But he had made no comments at all, nor asked any other questions. She didn't stop him from leaving, neither tried to. Instead, she lifted her hands and conjured forth a door out of the ancestral ground. He moved towards it, but just a step away from disappearing within, he turned slightly and whispered, I'm sorry. Even after he left, with the door fading away, the words of his still resonated continuously through the ancestral grounds, and Isolde remained rooted to where she was, unable to move an inch. I'm sorry. The words resonated again, and then, drop. The sound of something dropping onto the ground echoed out, and she raised her hand to her face, watching as teardrops quickly pooled on her fingers. I am in tears. She could not understand. There was no pain in her heart, though for reasons unknown it repeatedly quaked within her. I'm sorry. The words echoed out once more within her, and she was left asking, who is he? Just published a new book, titled Mecha Devourer System. When Ryuk stepped out of the white door, the story still lingered in his mind. He understood more than he had been told and could easily piece things together. All of it was similar to a beast-tamer and his beast story. The beast was Isolde, and the tamer was that woman. If Ryuk had to face a possibly world-ending war, then naturally Isha would fight in that war. She had been in every big fight he had had up until now. And if she were the queen of her race, then naturally, she would send forth the order to have her race fight with him. That was exactly what had happened, except that the war was devastating and all lives were lost. It was one of those rare cases when a noble act, such as loyalty, could quickly turn into a monstrous, wicked act. The Frost Wyverns blamed Isolde for their loss, and naturally, their hate got transferred onto Isha. If Isolde had not joined that war and still held the goodwill of her race, then, naturally, Isha, on arriving, would have also been showered with the goodwill of her mother. If the opposite happened, which it did, then it was fair. He couldn't really fight them for what they had done to Isha anymore. Better to leave it as is since Isha herself was now safe with him. What do you think of that woman? The woman who Isolde serves. The system panel blinked as a light glinted in Ryuk's eyes. Uncle Bob mentioned that Isha was a gift from my mother. So Isolde must have given birth to Isha just before the war started, and she had passed it to my mother, who must have passed it to Uncle Bob. If that woman riding on Isolde was my mother, then everything matches. He thought before his eyes stilled as he looked at the Wyvernoid kingdom beneath him. My aim is done here. Elder Selene and her group have achieved their goals. Ryuk mused to himself. I previously thought I might have to leave Isha here with her parents and people too, but now, it's better if she remains with me. Her peace isn't here. I'll find out what really happened. Was the war truly lost? Would Isolde have ordered her people to follow in combat if she wasn't confident that they could win? Or was it a desperate situation where she had to order her people to fight for a hopeful chance at victory? If all that went into that war never returned, then I want to see their graveyards. Years have passed since then. They would have turned to dust. I don't believe Isolde died in the war, Ryuk muttered. If Isha goes to a war with me, displaying such loyalty, then no matter how powerful the opponent, I would have done anything in my power to make sure she at least survived, even at the expense of my own life. Any good beast tamer would have done that, especially one with such a deep bond with their tame beasts. Ryuk mused, but the system remained quiet. The Null Dragon war, and only the Nulls remained. I refused to accept that the dragons lost. They couldn't have, he whispered, his hands unconsciously folding tight into his fist, as his lips parted open to reveal a draconic maw once more. Emotional dissonance sensed. The system panel flashed, and Ryuk exhaled, calming the anger in his heart. It's time to visit the Nulls. After all, the winners hold all the answers. He thought, taking a single step forward, when he paused, his neck jerking behind him. There was nothing but the depth of the void, but the void has been locked down. Ryuk realized, taking back his step, as he remained where he was. He had tried to teleport but failed. Something that could stop his teleportation. At this stage, I have a place to be, so if you have a word, speak now, he said into the void of space, and while silence continued for about 5 seconds, it was broken. Moshi Moshi I. The words rang out, and Ryuk raised his head just to witness a ginormous object exit the void above him. What the hell? It was a ship, but the size of it. It was bigger than End-Earth as a world, fully golden in color. Even though it possessed such humongous size, it glided with relative ease, but Ryuk's eyes were right upon the symbol drawn on the object. That symbol, it's them, he thought, recognizing the organization. Back when he attempted to rescue the group from the clutches of that sinister organization, they were embroiled in an all-out war with another powerful enemy. And Ryuk had exchanged a single move with them after forcefully breaking through the barrier on that ship to escape. Don't tell me they tracked me down all the way from then, he thought in disbelief, watching as the ship's hatch opened and the first to step down was a girl. A girl who looked just about 13 or so, jumping out of the hatch with a big skip in her steps. She had blue hair tied into 2 long knots that trailed past her legs, and wore a short blue shirt with mismatched pants, one cut off at the knee, the other stretching down to her ankle. Giggles constantly erupted forth from her lips, and she was most likely the one who had given the Moshi Moshi greeting. But walking out after her was a man. A white-skinned man with short feathery white hair. Fully dressed in a simple white shirt and trousers, Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed at the sight. He was also a young man about 25 or so, but he had no aura. He wasn't there, though he was there, something really hard for Ryuk to define. 2 more stepped out after him, and they were 2 females, dressed in golden robes, with one of them having a hoodie over her robe while the other let her golden hair loose. Ryuk recognized the one with loose-haired one. She was the one who had fired arrow shots at him when he tried to escape the last time, and to confirm, she had a bow strung over her back while seemingly hiding behind the back of the older hooded woman. There, that's him, she immediately called out, pointing at Ryuk's face. His expression plummeted as he asked, "What do you want this time?" "Ryuk null." The loud call rang out, and it came from none other than the white-haired man who jumped out of the hatch, striding towards Ryuk. "Finally, we meet. Believe me when I say I've been looking forward to this day for a very, very, very long time," the man said, his smile wide like a long-lost uncle reuniting with his nephew. "Come give me a hug," he said, arms opened wide to the side for a big hug, but he was stopped halfway when Ryuk stretched out his palm, pausing him in his steps. "Do I know you?" Ryuk asked flatly. The question made the man pause, lips opening and closing, eyebrows twitching as he slowly lowered his arms, rubbing his chin as if deep in thought. Now that I think about it, I really never left behind a clear clue of myself. That's weird. I thought I did. Or was I thinking you would have felt me in some way? A feeling? Real or imagined? And for the next 10 seconds, everyone watched in silent stupor as the man continually yapped over and over again, completely lost in his train of thought. "Knock it off, seer," the hooded lady snapped, slamming her shoulder into him and sending him stumbling aside. She stepped forward towards Ryuk, her hand shifting out, and golden light coalesced, forming a gigantic bow and arrow that was pointed right at Ryuk's face. "You scarred my sister's face. I won't let that slide," she said, about to pull the arrow back when Seer appeared between them, arms spread wide in front of the arrow. Hey, Zara, remember the order. We bring him back without a scar. Go away. He'll heal before we get back to base. I'll say we shouldn't risk it. What if he doesn't heal? Get out of my sight, Seer, or I don't mind skewering you both." She spat out, shifting her aim at Seer, and soon enough it became another unending skirmish between the two. This left just the golden-haired girl from before and the little blue-haired girl, who skipped forward towards Ryuk, pausing 3 meters away from him. "Ryuk Null is your name, right, mister?" the girl asked brightly. Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed. "Yes. Great. My name's Finks, and we're all from the AER, which stands for Anomalous Existence Regulation," she said with a cheerful smile. Ryuk hummed. That was obviously the first thing someone should have said, yet it was the youngest of them who actually bothered. "On the order of Lord Asgard, one of the 7 lords in AR, we been instructed to bring you back to base for a meeting with him," she explained. "And might you know why Lord Asgard would request an audience with me?" Ryuk asked, watching her twist a strand of her knotted blue hair around her finger. "Actually, no. But according to protocol, you're most likely being invited over for the same reason as most others, your anomalous existence." "My anomalous existence?" Ryuk asked. "Yes, Ryuk. According to the information we have on you, You've grown far beyond the natural peak of your world. Endearth, the lower realm you came from, has its highest cultivation at the eternity stage, with only a single person reaching pseudo-apocrypha. She pointed at him lightly, her tone still sweet but serious. But not only did you shatter that, you went on to grow from the apocrypha stage to the exigna stage, and then to the nihility stage, your existence repeatedly undergoing substantial changes with every breakthrough. On this basis, you've been designated as an anomaly. Wouldn't you agree? So, Lord Asgard wishes to know the secrets behind these changes, doesn't he? He asked with a beaming, cute smile that the girl returned with a happy nod. Exactly. But even more important, he wishes to enlighten you about your new existence, and how to live with it, she said. Noticing Ryuk's furrowed brows, she added, you've been recognized as still carrying an inferior mindset about yourself, even though your anomaly value marks you as fundamentally a superior being. This disharmony in mindset will bring nothing but chaos, and, on your level, it will deal a massive blow to the chaos level in the universe. An example being what you just had going on with the Frost Wyvern, taking over the minds of others against their permission or willingness, and almost destroying their strongest, which could have left the kingdom unfurling into a chaotic mess. Your existence brings chaos due to the disharmony of an inferiority mindset and superior power. Lord Asgard senses this and invites you over, she explained lengthily as Ryuk hummed. You might not know, but in AER, we have many other life hierarchically superior beings such as you. You'll meet them, learn to balance your power and mindset, and achieve harmony. This brings order to the universe, and helps our big task at AER, which is maintaining order in the universe. This is why we want you to come with us to meet Lord Asgard. She finished just as the squabble between Seer and Zera subsided. All eyes turned to Ryuk. He nodded slowly for a moment before speaking. While I do have a place I need to be, I suppose I don't mind taking a quick detour to your base to meet this Lord Asgard. Yay! Finks cheered, leaping into the air. Don't be dumb, Finks, he's being sarcastic, the golden-haired girl said with narrowed eyes as Finks's happy jump came to a stop, and she looked at Ryuk, who burst out into loud snickering. You really expected me to just jump into the ship and follow you to some AER organization tasked with maintaining the universe's order, whilst also possessing beings as superior as me, but somehow whose name I've never heard before, he said with a scoff of disbelief, as Finks shrugged her shoulder. Well, it's all for the benefit of both of us, so I don't see any reason why you wouldn't, she said, as Ryuk's brows creased and the group watched him fall silent. You feel they're substantial or meh? The system asked as Ryuk hummed slightly. They know my name, they know Endearth, they know the peak cultivation level of Endearth, and they even know about Old Jack being the only pseudo-apocrypha. The only one I know from among them is that golden-haired girl, and I didn't exchange a word with her or see her for more than 3 seconds, so she couldn't possibly have gathered all of that information from our passing by. They've been watching, since back on Endearth up until this level, while I had no idea of their existence. They're anything but meh, he replied. And speaking of which, I've been losing control of my draconic side a lot. Any little bit of emotion, and my maw comes shifting out. Beyond my control. Even now, I can feel it. It wants to burst out of me. I'm not sure if this has anything to do with her mindset power disharmony, but if their organization is as powerful as they claim, then it's worth giving a chance. I take back my words, Ryuk said, as they turned to look at him curiously. I will come with you. Yay! If, Ryuk said, pausing her happy dance. If what? The white-haired man asked. If you can convince me that the AER is as powerful as you said, he replied. Zera felt it was something kind of fair, but equally difficult. How could they prove that? Well, we have some files and pick to. Your Lord Asgard, Ryuk said, silencing her. He is the one who sent you here, right? And he was confident in you all being able to bring me back. I'm sure he didn't send you all here just to be told no. Buy me and return, did he? He said, grinning. Seer chuckled while a smirk appeared on Zera's lips. Seems like you're not as dumb as I thought, she said, and Ryuk shrugged. Then things just got simpler. I want to believe that this Lord Asgard is a powerful being, and naturally, his judgment must be absolute. If he believes you all can take me on and bring me back, then you all must be able to capture me and bring me back. If you fail to capture me, then that means he is a being of poor judgment. I want to have nothing to do with your organization if that is true, Ryuk said. So you're proposing a fight, Finks said. If we can capture you, then you'll come with us. If we can't, then we're all talk with no action and you won't, the little girl said before shrugging. Fair enough. The second that word was completed, she disappeared. And in less than a split second, Ryuk stood where she had been, his arms sweeping outward in a swathing motion. Kaboom! The massive ship lurched violently as Finks slammed into it, the impact so great it sent the entire vessel tilting backward before vanishing into a chasm torn open by the incredible force. That's one down, Ryuk whispered, raising his head to the others, and now they could see the complete morphing of his face. It had turned almost demonic, with purple veins sprouting out of his skin along with a maw that almost divided his entire head into two. The abnormal transformation had taken place faster than they could follow at all. Immediately, the others backed off with speed, and in the next moment, weapons were withdrawn as powerful auras undulated through the void. Ryuk's hands shifted into humongous claws twice the size of his head, and they pulled at his hair. You can come out now. It's over! The word rang out beside Ryuk's head, as he felt a powerful slash of white light slicing towards his neck with speed. It slashed through his neck, the smoothest cleave possible as his head was separated from the rest of his body. Yet Seer felt a chill in his spine when he looked and saw Ryuk's eyes still fixated on him. His lips moved. Is it? His maws parted, and turbid white smoke blew out in the next moment. They widened further and a pillar of destructive energy burst out, as thick as a pillar, slamming into the man who crossed his sword over his chest, blocking the strike as he was pushed into the void. Suddenly flashing back faster, Seer gave himself 5 inches distance away from the pillar, and in the next moment, his katana jerked backwards and then a white blade cleaved forward with heaven-shaking power, slicing the entire pillar into clean halves. At the other end were Ryuk, eyes staring right at him even through the severed energy pillar, and his lips moved once more at him as he muttered, I'm just starting. The residual sword light cleaved his head, but at the same time, his body burst with a loud bang that left a cloud of blood-red mist in the void. The sound of a pounding heartbeat rang out through the void, sending forth incredibly destructive ripples that sent the Seer's hair rippling wildly. In the next moment, something stepped out of the cloud of blood red. A single silhouette of a gigantic claw that made them seem like an ant in comparison with its mass. Then his full body emerged. A dragon. It was a dragon, its mere height about 1,000 kilometers. For massive limbs ending in equally massive claws, a tail that extended far, far into the void, and a long neck that ended in a draconic head whose closed maws were oozing massive white flames. On its head, for massive horns, 2 curved up into the sky and another 2 curved down below. Around his head were 6 revolving white crystals, and of the 6, 3 of them were beyond eye-catching. One of the crystals burned with white flames, another with an orange-red hue, while the other had its color changing into something different every time they blinked. Their hearts beat in their chest. The white scales on his body were like gemstones, whiter than frosty snow, and in his chest was a clear, frosty white core, seemingly the essence of his entire being. What should have been a thoughtful growl came out as a thick, beastly growl instead, as Ryuk turned to look at himself, seeing the changes. So this is the true form of a Beyonder dragon? His previous Beyonder dragon form had been humanoid, but this time he had completely changed. When he took his gaze away to look at the 3 beneath him, he saw them. All that they were. Their weakness, their powers, ranging down to the capability of the weapons they held. He saw all that they were, and all he felt in the end was disappointment. Your Lord Asgard, Ryuk said as one of his massive claws pointed at them. Has failed, Ryuk said, giving them all a piercing eye glance. If he wants me, tell him to come himself and I'll welcome him with open claws. As for having me come to him, I do not believe he's worthy enough, Ryuk said as he turned his back against them. Return and tell him that. Lord Asgard didn't fail, Seer said. Ryuk paused, slowly turning his head to look at him. Every light has its dark, and the same is true for power. Its dark, inescapable side is arrogance, which is fine, until it makes you jump to wrong conclusions. The sound of a katana leaving its sheath echoed through the void, revealing a fine 1.2-meter blade. But this time, Seer didn't immediately attack him. He let go of the sheath, letting it fall into the endless dark, and stepped forward instead. Zara didn't follow. She moved back instead, as though giving him and Ryuk space. I told you I've been looking forward to this day for a long, long time, haven't I? Seer said and then began to transform. From a height of just 2 meters, he grew taller, soon reaching 10 meters. But to the current Ryuk, that was still shorter than his claws. Divine white light flared around him, coalescing into the shape of a samurai's armor, along with a white helmet that settled on his head. His blade lengthened continuously, until it stood nearly twice his own height, glowing white runes trailing across its surface. They call me Seer. Seer, the sword peak. He took a step forward, and the void beneath his feet turned milky white in color. That whiteness spread rapidly, surging toward Ryuk. It passed through him and continued for nearly a kilometer at his other side before halting. Seer was gone. There was no sound of a sword being drawn. No slash, only the white glow, and yet when Seer straightened at the other end of the colored void and turned back, he was just in time to see a massive limb fall away, cleanly severed in two. Interesting, Ryuk growled, staring down at one of his own legs. Even covered in those impenetrable scales, it had been sliced cleanly through as if it were butter. The wound glowed with a halo of white light that spread rapidly, consuming half the remaining stump and turning it into drifting white ash. This was Seer. A single slash of his sword, and his enemies would vanish into white ash. But not Ryuk. In an instant, the white motes turned dark, corrupted by an unknown energy, and from the stump, the void shook as another limb erupted outward. A slit tore open across Ryuk's back, 2 massive wings unfolding in an instant, and his serpentine eyes fixed upon Seer, who stood ready with his sword in a knight's guard. I am coming, Ryuk announced, and with a single flap of his wings he was gone. A colossal claw tore out from the void, and Seer's blade flashed forward, erasing space itself. Ferocious energy burst outward, as claws and sword clashed insanely, neither giving an inch. But when he turned his head, another claw was already snaking through. With a powerful push, Seer forced Ryuk's strike back an inch, then immediately unleashed 3 arcs of sword light, driving the massive claw even further away. He spun, cleaving downward toward the second claw, severing it cleanly from Ryuk's arm. Yet another claw surged from the side. And another. And another. In the blink of an eye, 4 monstrous claws burst from the void, encircling Seer from every direction before slamming forward with a force strong enough to shatter a lower world to smithereens. Guardian Vanguard. Seer stood upright, his sword raised before him, with its edge pointed to the skies. His eyes shut tight, his hair whipped wildly in the raging winds. In the next instant, his eyes snapped open, hollow white, with the image of a glowing sword gleaming deep within their depths. Evergone slash. Kaboom! The crash of all 4 claws detonated like worlds colliding, their sheer force ripping the void apart. They hammered down on Seer, grinding him into nothingness as the abyss itself quaked under the impact. A halo of white light erupted from within their grip. It flashed in an arc across each claw, and golden blue blood splashed through the void as the massive claws were reduced to 1,000 fragments. And when the light cleared, Seer remained, unscathed. His sword hung at his side as he walked forward, each step turning the dark void itself white. Step by step, He closed in on Ryuk, and a full breath later, the space by Ryuk's neck turned white. A sword arc curved violently through the void, racing for his neck. Ryuk twisted, his maw opening wide, as a colossal ball of white flames was conjured in their depths. Space itself was torn apart. Black holes convulsed into being only to collapse instantly. Entire fragments of existence shattered as a violent pillar of dark energy blasted forth at Seer, who also flashed forward with speed. His hands jerked backward, then once again thrust his sword outward. Guardian Vanguard, absolute severment. The blade cut into the beam, and where it passed, existence was split into two. It carved forward unrelentingly like a path through a raging torrent, continuing onwards towards Ryuk's neck. But they never reached him. A powerful collision rang out as a titanic claw slammed into Seer's back, hurling him downwards with a sickening crack. He formed a blazing trail of white blood spraying violently from the wound as his body tore through the void. He tumbled down for nearly 100,000 miles before finally coming to a halt. When he lifted his head, disbelief filled his glowing sword eyes. Standing in the distance was no longer one dragon, but two. And then, before his gaze, the void rippled again, and out stepped another dragon, and another, until there were 5 colossal dragons, each radiating the same overwhelming aura, with all locking their eyes onto him. What is this? Seer muttered in shock. A cloning art? He had seen countless imitations. He knew clones were usually weaker than the original, at most half their true strength. The strongest he had ever encountered was one who could create a single clone equal to his full power. And even then, no more than 2. Yet here stood 5. They didn't even bother with words. The 5 pairs of colossal wings spread wide, and what followed was nothing. No sound, nor light. Nothing at all, and yet it was everything. There was no void. It was blown through so fast that it no longer existed. He had arts he could call on in his head, yet his mind remained blank. What is it? This paralyzing aura. A sudden fear that wiped out every will of him, conjuring forth any resistance. He looked up, and the image was forever burned into Seer's existence. The dragon flying towards him, predatorily, and then a flash so bright, it blinded him of all senses. A total of 10 massive claws, burning furiously with white flames and an orange light, cleaved recklessly through Seer's body. They shredded through the armor and then through his body. Even the drops of blood in his body were unable to escape being shredded to nothing. When he opened his eyes, he was nothing but a head, the only thing left unharmed, and he silently fell through the void. Looking up, Ryuk was hovering there in the void, his eyes looking at him with a blank expression. When did I lose sight of him? He thought, as Ryuk's image overlapped. The dragonoid turned into a regular white-haired kid in dirty clothes, soot over his face. I have seen the fate of Endearth ever since. I have seen what would save it and taken an interest in him. I knew he would be an anomaly if he were to alter the fate of a world. How did I miscalculate? Endearth was supposed to be the only thing he altered. What is this image? This end? He thought as a vision he saw loomed behind Ryuk's back. One of his eyes shut closed, robbed of consciousness, and he fell through the clouds of the world beneath, soon fading out of view. You spared him? The system panel blinked, and Ryuk turned to his claws. For some reason, he had never at all planned not to cleave through Seer's head. Yet at the last second, his own claws had paused themselves, avoiding Seer's head and letting him live. That's weird. While I wasn't really thinking about killing him, I also didn't think of keeping him alive, he muttered, and that was when he felt the faint life aura. He turned his head, finding someone crawling out of the chasm in space. It was Finks, the blue-haired girl, and her left hand was covered in a tattoo image glowing with blue light. The tattoo was that of a butterfly. You're still awake, Ryuk said, as Finks watched all 5 pairs of eyes turn to her. As he stepped forward before her, a figure appeared in his path. Standing protectively over Finks, Zera. Get back, the hooded woman said, her golden bow aimed at Ryuk, with 5 massive flaming arrows locked on the string. Ryuk paused. "That's weird. I thought you wanted me to come," he said, snickering a bit. And in that moment, all 4 remaining dragons disappeared, leaving just one. "I don't know what you did, Finks, but—" Ryuk called out, looking at the tiny girl. "Seer survived because of it. It would have been a waste to kill him," he said, turning his back, and he flapped his wings once more. Space fragments rippled forward towards them, and immediately a golden barrier appeared, conjured by the other golden-haired girl, protecting them from the force of his movement. When everything settled, Ryuk was gone, and Zera slowly lowered her arrow, her brows furrowed. "We couldn't take him on," it occurred to her as she looked at the path where he had gone. Seer was strong. One of the strongest high anomalies was there. Zera believed herself to be stronger still, but she had just watched him cleave to pieces when Ryuk had gotten serious. She knew she couldn't have defeated him, and only she and Seer had combat power. Finks was a fate alterer whose power only worked at the last second, and her sister couldn't fight a battle on this scale. In the end, they had failed. "Hey, Zeronica!" Xerix called out to her sister, who blinked at her. "Fetch Seer. We're returning back to base," she said, and silently Zeronica flew down. "We can still," Finks tried to say, but she was silenced. "We can't. In fact, no high anomaly can take him on," Xerix said firmly. "The only ones on his level are the lords themselves. Though they want him, they did not feel he was strong enough an anomaly to warrant their attention. But now, according to Antares, the upper realm was split into 2 vast domains. The celestial side, where the majority of the races dwelled, and the conqueror side, home to the evil races. The nulls fell in the evil race class, so Ryuk knew he was to find the conqueror side of the upper realms first. The only problem was that he had no idea where it was. Wait! It suddenly occurred to him as his humongous form paused in the void. A second later, a light bloomed, with a letter appearing in his grasp. "I was given an invitation letter from that Evander guy, said to be from the 6th null calamity." When Ryuk opened it, he found a basic anniversary coronation letter, which by now was already far gone. But what he needed wasn't to attend some coronation party. It was the tiny little compass at the top right edge of the letter. It must have been the direction to her location, which he guessed would be in the evil side of the upper realm, and right now the arrow was pointing to the side. "Got it," he muttered, and in the next moment, he blasted through the void with speed, rapidly moving in the direction of the compass. An hour of flying, and Ryuk appeared where he wanted to be. He didn't slow down or stop, passing so fast that when the evil races looked up at the sky, all they found were chasms and broken shards of reality. A phenomenon that caught some attention. "You really sure you don't want to pause and gather some info about the nulls or the happenings of this domain before you make your move?" The system panel blinked, but Ryuk's eyes remained locked on the distance. Another 3 hours of flying, and he found it, a location teeming with a particular race that made his maw unconsciously grind together. His irises narrowed from circular to serpentine slits, and the blue of his eyes bled away, replaced by a burning crimson red. "I am here. Finally." This was it. The home of those who had ripped him apart, limb by limb. Gothic dark castles stretched as far as his eyes could see, covered in black soot, while the ground was like a gem of crimson red, where various nulls moved around in flocks. In the distance, mountains held bubbling streams of lava that snaked through the domain like water paths. The skies above were gray and gloomy, red lightning flashing with every passing heartbeat. The aura of it all did nothing but nauseate Ryuk. Fiery rage bloomed through his soul as memories flashed in his head, confirmed by familiar objects within the domain. He threw his head downward and then, shock waves rippled outward, blasting the Gothic castles within a kilometer radius into the sky. Many nulls collapsed instantly from the sonic force, only to be swept away by the force. His maws opened wide, massive flames pouring out as a gigantic ball of white flames rapidly formed. He was about to unleash it downwards when the panel blinked before him. "I understand your anger," But if you release it, you won't just be killing nulls, you would be killing the children too, newly born and unborn. They might be nulls, but they're innocent, it said, and Ryuk halted the breath on his lips. His claws dug deeper into the mountain, sending massive rocks tumbling downwards. But in the end, the crimson color in his eyes slowly receded, regaining their blue color, and the serpentine slit changed to a full circle. The fiery anger within him was reined in, and the orb of destructive breath faded from his maws. As expected, they began to rise into the air. Massive nullic beings, their forms like nightmares born straight from the darkest of hells. A dragon, in our null domain. You dare! A hulking 100-meter null spoke. His devilish body cracked, and writhing instead of blood, was glowing red lava instead. He was about to utter a second word, but he never did. Ryuk's draconic tail shot out with mind-numbing speed, ripping straight through his open mouth and piercing out from the back of his skull. His hands fell helplessly to the side, and he died instantly, eyes still wide open in horror and disbelief. Turning his eyes to the rest, they staggered back in shock, only for the thunder-like growl to reach their ears. "Fetch me your calamities, now!" His roar slammed into their hulking bodies, sending them flying away like ragdolls. "They have one day to appear before me, or your kingdom will cease to exist." With that, he flung the impaled null's corpse onto a random castle, blowing it into dust. A single, sharp huff through his nose, and he turned away, curling atop the mountain. His eyes slid shut. One of the nulls carried off the body of their fallen companion, sparing one last glance at the dragon slumbering above them. That simple act of it had revealed to them that it was something they could never defeat. But they were those who could, and so they rushed away to call them. "I'll let the innocents live. For now." Ryuk forced out the reply to the system. "After a day, if they still don't show themselves, then they must be asking to see my worst. May the innocents be damned after that." So he's finally here. The words echoed within an abysmally vast throne room. Along the floor, streams of lava danced through cracks, and before the stairs stood a hulking, golem-like null, seemingly carved from the darkest gemstones. Every flex of his muscles radiated horrifying physical might, his breath alone shaking the air, and yet he knelt humbly before the throne. A massive seat of darkness, its armrests lined with the skulls of defeated creatures. Shining runes still radiated from the creatures' skulls, making one wonder what abominations they had been when alive, and yet, more than 38 of them adorned the armrests alone, and on this throne sat a demon. Even seated, his height reached over 1,000 meters. A long robe of darkness draped his form, concealing everything but his face, and on that was a single eye glaring from the center of his forehead above a closed, expressionless maw. On his head was red hair floating behind him as gravity refused to go near it. His devilish maw soon parted, forming a wicked smirk as he gazed down at the kneeling titan. "Yes, Devil Lord Azragoth," it answered. "By his rage and words, he must be the one, the son of Thaith Vorgoth." The throne room trembled as the being stirred from his throne. "While he has indeed spared me the trouble of seeking him, he himself has walked into his death. Prepare my devil axe and unchain my hellish army. Tonight, we shall drag hell down upon this accursed realm." It was a room one of strings and dolls. Nails jutted from the dark walls, each strung with dangling dolls. Some white, some black, some crafted with beauty, others twisted and grotesque. The same hung across the windows, the ceiling, even the corners, every surface claimed by string dolls. The only light came through a tiny opening, crimson rays spilling into the room and right upon the center, giving illumination to a massive bed, half of it draped in violet strands of long, tangled hair, all of it traced back to a figure lying on the violet sheets. A pale white lady lying on her stomach, with both her legs raised, and swinging up and down lazily. In her hands was a bizarre purple doll she was carefully knitting. Her rosy red lips held a string, the end wrapped in her delicate, doll-like fingers that gently wove the doll together. She hummed as she silently knitted, but all of a sudden, the soft humming stopped abruptly. She glanced aside, eyes falling on a certain doll, the only one not strung on the walls. It sat on a desk, blinking with a violet light. "You may speak, Evander," she voiced calmly, her voice thin like that of a child, and the light blinked 3 times. A silent communication that made her hand pause from the knitting. "Oh, he finally came. The coronation is over, though so clearly, he isn't here for that," she murmured. "Still," she said, her eyes brightening with a rejuvenated glow as she rolled off the bed. "It's a reason to get on my feet. Finally." A void with darkness darker than darkness. Silence covered all, the abyss extending as far down as eyes could see. Deathly calm, but in a moment, everything began to quiver. The abyss churned and rolled, the darkness whipping violently around like a powerful storm. The sound of chains clattering heavily rang out from the depths of the abyss, and slowly something flickered out of the darkness. A dark light, one identifiable even through the dark, appeared, forming 2 rays, and they were the result of 2 pairs of ginormous eyes opening on. They were the eyes of a demon, fully pitch black with not the slightest other color within them. A voice, grating and explosive, sounding like a devilish growl, boomed through this void. "Sentio Iram. I feel a rage. Iram rubram ardentem. A rage burning crimson. Reditum habit. Ipsi est filius Cetes. He has returned. He the son of carnage." At this point, the chains madly clattered, and then, the sound of them being forced to lengthen rang out, followed by their snapping. A devilish roar, but it was different from that of a beast, as it came more as a hellish growl. Well deserving, for the one who had awakened was a beast from the depths of hell, a true horror buried in the abyss for years, and now, it had awakened once more. "Awaken the ancient devils." The order rang out through a hall, where but a single being sat. All around him, deep unsettling darkness. He sat upon a throne, his hands resting on the hilt of a pitch-black sword that remained buried in the ground. Cracks spread from where the tip had made contact, and veins of darkness surged through into the distance. Though there was no being around him, the darkness coiled and lurked as if itself was under the night's power, there to serve his order. The man's head slowly raised, revealing a face where 5 long claws drew across his deathly black skin. Golden eyes burned furiously from where his eyes ought to be, but there were no eyes, only a runic drawing that sent forth an eerie beam of golden light. It didn't illuminate the darkness, but instead further disappeared into it, as if it were one with it. The sound of metal creaking rang out, followed by the massive quivering of the ground as the sword's edge was pulled off the ground and raised into the air, sending forth a massive arc of golden light that tore out into the sky. "If he, the son of Thaith Vorgeth, has paid us a visit, then it's only natural we give him a warm welcome." "May the souls of all those who die tonight never find peace." The prayer was a whisper from a white dragon standing on top of a tall mountain, and that dragon was none other than Ryuk. Fully uncurled from the mountain, his eyes looked forward, and he found a sea of darkness slowly rolling forth towards him. Boom! The ground quaked repeatedly as crimson-red lightning violently lurched around, and this lightning seemed to follow someone whose every step made the entire ground seem as if an earthquake were happening. It was a hellish army. "Ryuk, their numbers are many, and I can still sense even more powerful presences slowly gushing forth, as if more beings are awakening. You cannot fight this war alone." The panel blinked in bold as Ryuk's eyes remained on the approaching army. "You have yet to find Void and Rakshasa. Get them and evolve them, and they will be able to aid you." "Hey, system!" Ryuk suddenly called out, as the panel blinked, Yes. Undergo shutdown protocol for 100 hours. Shutdown order given. Implanting shutdown modules. Done. System will shut down in 3, 2. And like that, the only voice that could speak into his head apart from his own was sent away. So, you are the one? The voice echoed out, louder than the sound of thunderclapping, as Devil Lord Azragoth stepped forward toward him. His eyes were like rays of darkness already piercing through such a far distance to collide squarely within Ryuk's. You have chosen to appear in the form of those weaklings. Are you making your side clear already? He said with a loud bellow, as Ryuk's claws slowly unfurled. The one on his right paw blazed with a milky white light, while those on his left burned a deep orange. His tail elongated, its edge sharpening before it ignited in a dark, abyssal flame, one laced with drifting specks of purple. His wide, circular irises narrowed back into serpentine slits, turning crimson red, and then they erupted into red flames. Ryuk had no red flames or energy in his plethora of skills, giving the red burn only a single meaning. It was rage. It burned so furiously in his soul that it manifested out to the physical as burning red flames. Ryuk could already feel it, the explosive muscles hidden beneath the robes of the colossal being walking towards him. Yet what spurred him with rage was the aura from those muscles. They belonged to him. Even now, after he found not much importance in his missing body parts, something about seeing what ought to belong to him in the hands of others still nauseated him. The armies that followed Azragoth were beings like him, also draped in dark robes, with the only thing visible being their crimson eyes. Azragoth halted 30,000 kilometers away. From the dark lines of his robe, 2 massive hands emerged, each grasping a colossal black axe whose hilt was lined with skulls. It pointed at Ryuk as the order boomed through the place. End him! Powerful growls resonated forth as the cloud of darkness containing Azragoth's army roared forward. Yet in the moment all froze when a single flap of his wings and Ryuk disappeared. When he reappeared again, his eyes locked straight onto Azragoth's own crimson eyes, and there was barely a centimeter distance between their eyes. They're unworthy. He had crossed a distance of 30,000 kilometers in far, far less than a split second. His words made a cold grin curl up Azragoth's lips. The space before his face rippled powerfully as a massive draconic claw smashed towards his face. The sound of metal clashing against metal resounded as an axe smashed straight into Ryuk's claws. He had blocked. Even with less than an inch of space between them, Azragoth had brought up his bear-like arm and blocked the claw. Interesting, Azragoth muttered, and the space beneath Ryuk was blown apart as an axe came flying out of the robes, heading straight for his underbelly. He slashed his second claw downward, stopping the axe in its track, but then a third axe suddenly appeared. The space before the axe rippled chaotically, not with sharpness but with horrifying brute power, and it smashed into the side of Ryuk's ribs. The sound of his scales trying to defend against the axe echoed, yet they did not last a second before they were ripped through as the axe carved through Ryuk's side. It burst up towards his shoulder, traveling for over 300 meters before it was ripped out of him. White blood burst into the air like a tempest as Ryuk was roughly blown away. Yet, Azragoth took 3 steps backward, each one creating an abyss from the force of his legs hitting the ground. He came to a stop on the 4th step, and raising his arm, one could see a slash mark burning with dark energy over his shoulder. Really interesting. The slash mark disappeared along with the burn, but something else didn't survive the burning. The robe Azragoth wore was burned to ashes, revealing his figure. The first thing easily noticeable was the 6 massive arms. Yes, he wasn't just a titan. He was a 6-armed titan, and every single arm held the same gigantic dark axe in its grasp. All 6 arms raised high, the axes spinning in them, before Azragoth caught them. In the next moment he took a single step forward, his body leaning toward Ryuk, and then, boom! The floor shifted backward, an abyss carving open as he burst forward with furious speed, appearing right above Ryuk in a second. Show me your power, son of Thaith Vorgoth. Prove to me you're truly deserving of his name. 6 axes, brimming with incredible brute force, slammed downward toward Ryuk, who, in return, had his maws opened wide, conjuring forth a massive orb of white flames. In the next instant, the massive ball of energy was shot forward, so big it was for a moment all that Azragoth could see. Yet his humorous grin only widened as he cleaved downward onto the singular ball. Kaboom! They clashed forward in an unending explosion, the void continuously being altered, as various bizarre phenomena, such as lightning and light refraction, occurred at the center. But one thing remained supreme. He. The demonic laughter rang out as Azargotha's axe completely cleaved through the ball of energy and reappeared before Ryuk. Your punity makes me laugh. His axe cleaved through Ryuk, continuing down onto the ground and carving open an incredibly deep gash with an unseeable end. After that, Azragoth rose upright, all 6 arms by his side as he turned to find Ryuk hovering behind him. One diagonal mark crossed his belly, still dripping white blood, while a new one carved down from his neck straight to his chest. Just a little bit more, and it would have crossed the center core in Ryuk's heart. It occurred to Ryuk. Not only was this calamity before him a brute king, but his attacks, no matter how rough they seemed, were clearly precise. Even though it had seemed like he was trying to cleave through Ryuk's ball of energy, the truth was, it was heading for Ryuk's core, wanting to end the battle in one cleaving stroke. Looking at Ryuk's pathetic state at the very beginning of the fight, Azragoth paused silently for a while before he slowly shook his head. Thaith Vorgoth didn't deserve it, he muttered to himself, slowly turning to Ryuk. He was our king, our hero, and yet he gave it all up. For this? He asked, pointing his axe at Ryuk. You should never have been, for your mere existence alone brings nothing but shame to him, Azragoth said, and in the next moment he was gone. Ryuk turned, and he was faced with the sight of the axe cleaving down once more. His claws clashed against it, but this time, they couldn't contain the power of 6 axes. He was roughly blown to the ground while Azragoth did not move back an inch. Instead, he followed into the abyss Ryuk had disappeared into. For the next few minutes, there was nothing but the ceaseless sound of explosions after explosion, raging fire erupting out from the deepest part of the ground into the sky. It went on for about 45 minutes, and soon after, a figure burst out of the ground, crashing into it and tumoring several times before screeching to a halt. Boom! The ground quaked heavily once more as Azragoth followed out. One of his 6 arms had been ripped off, leaving just 5, yet crumpled on the ground was the dragon that had lost both its wings and both its horns. His claws were marred in cracks, and before Azragoth's gaze, he watched them shatter into nothing. Ryuk wobbled to his feet, eyes staring at Azragoth. Even though he seemed battered, his eyes were not those of someone who had lost. They were cold, analyzing eyes, and finally Ryuk uttered, I understand it now. The part of me you fused with is my muscular system, Ryuk said, spitting out a couple of broken teeth. Brute strength is a plus, but what you really possess is explosive power, he said, and in the next moment Azragoth was gone once more. Before Ryuk could react, an axe cleaved forward with terrifying speed, ripping through his left side. He was cut roughly through his entire body, divided into 2, and he collapsed onto the ground. Before I fused with your part, on the orders of the ancient devils, I was Thaith Vorgoth's 3rd most powerful army general. Your part was nothing but a further boost for my power. It never defined me at all, Azragoth said, looking at Ryuk's divided body, before he pointed at one of them. You, on the other hand, seem to be nothing without it. Can you not see I possess not even the slightest drop of his blood flowing within me? Ryuk replied, as Azragoth's eyebrows furrowed. Is that your excuse for being nothing? You took away my body parts, so I am weak and should be weak, Azragoth said with a scoff. If that is your train of thought, then you don't deserve them in the first place, he said. his axe cleaving through one side of Ryuk's divided side, leaving just one more slice left. "You're a fool," the remaining Slive spat out as Azragoth paused. "My question was, if I have not a single drop of Faith Vorgotha's blood within me, then why do you still call me his son?" Ryuk said, as Azragoth paused dumbfounded, before his grin widened uncontrollably. He threw his head back and laughed out loud, a devilish, spine-tingling laughter that echoed loudly through the null domain. A rebel? Who could have imagined? The son of the mighty Carnage, Faith Vorgoth, will try to refuse him, ha 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 ha. He laughed out, clutching his stomach from pain, before he paused. Perhaps this is the last sign of the fall of Blood of Carnage. "Well, tell me then," he said to Ryuk, "if you're not to be called the son of Faith Vorgoth, what else defines you?" "He he he. What else defines me, huh?" Ryuk muttered, only for his head to be grabbed as he dangled off Azragotha's hands. He flashed him a devilish grin, whispering, "Without your father, you'll be nothing." The half-sliced of him grinned wickedly back at Azragoth. "I am something. What are you then?" "Your end." Immediately, Azragotha's laughter died in his throat. For some reason, the voice that came out was loud. Loud enough not to be from the one dangling in his hands, and that was true as he watched the Ryuk in his hands completely lose all wisps of its life aura. Instantly, Azragoth turned his gaze to the sky, and his jaw fell as he looked up. The sky was no more. It was only a massive being of more than 10,000 kilometers, 10 times his own already colossal height, and right now, a demonic smile of mockery stretched across his lips as he laughed down at Azragoth. "You really thought I came here to be defeated with a couple of axe cleaves?" Ryuk said, snickering in mockery, pointing his giant finger downward. He voiced out in a thick, rumbling tone that echoed through the entire Nullic realm. "You pride yourself on brute power. Hence, you will be crushed with brute power," Ryuk said, and Azragoth burst out laughing. One of his hands let go of the divided side of Ryuk's body. It dropped down through the air, but before it touched the ground, an axe light flashed by and cleaved it into motes that dispersed with the wind. He shot back at Ryuk with a confident grin. "Defeat me at what I excel at the most? Hehehe. If you can do that, I'll take back my earlier words," Her said, pointing his axe at Ryuk, whose lips parted into a devilish maw. He didn't say anything more. Instead, he moved. Both of his massive arms rose high into the air. Even though his size was ridiculous, his speed wasn't. Immediately, both arms were raised into space, palms spread wide. Along the innermost surfaces of his hands, countless barrel tips slid out from every crevice, humming with an overwhelming, mechanical, destructive energy. And then, the arms slammed down with colossal force. Have you ever seen a world completely tilt off its gravitational axis? Exactly that was what happened when Ryuk's arms slammed down from space. The null planet couldn't withstand that level of force. Its very orbit pushed downwards. The hands pierced through the atmosphere, bursting into massive flames from the ridiculous friction. Yet the destructive energy radiating all around Ryuk made this even worse. All of that power slammed toward a single being, Azragoth. Standing there with 5 arms, his head raised, and there was nothing in his line of sight save for that palm. Such power! And for just a second the image altered for Azragoth. Instead of a massive palm, it became something simpler. A crimson scythe eternally dripping with blood, slashing down onto him. It was a strike from the past. A strike from him. The vision completely set off Azragoth as he unconsciously took a step back from fear, but in the next moment, that reality shattered. He realized his own error, and veins crawled over his face in anger and disgust at himself. A powerful, devilish roar burst out of Azragotha's lungs as his height forcefully increased. Swelling from just over 1,000 meters to 3,000, the arms that had been ripped off him burst out of his shoulders, fully regenerated with a loud. But that was far from the end. for more arms ripped out from his sides, bringing the total arms to 8 massive arms. Furious crimson energy burst out of every fiber of his being, his muscles enlarging until he was twice his previous size. With all 8 hands clenching his axe's shaft, cracks spread from how tightly he held them. Kaboom! The ground shattered into an endless abyss as Azragoth bounced off the ground, soaring upward toward the comet-like hand. "I won't lose!" Azragoth roared out as all 8 arms cleaved forward with power. The explosion made no sound at all. It was absolute silence that unfolded, as both the Azragoth axe and the falling palm suddenly vanished from sight. Furiously burning, destructive energy blazed all over Azragoth's face as dimensions rapidly unfurled around him. The energy wave rippled through reality itself, expanding into deeper and deeper dimensions, yet his hold held out powerfully against the descending palms that pressed down with even more power. Hey hey hey! The evil laughter seemed to have come from a faraway dimension as destructive energy atop the palms burned furiously. "Resist all you may, Azragoth. You shall fail still." The sound of the axe cracking resounded as Azragoth's hand bulged to 5 times its size. The palm forced down with an explosive force beyond what was capable for a weapon to bear, and in an instant. Impossible! All 8 axes Azragoth wielded shattered into pieces. The destructive energy struck him head-on, hurling him downward as the dimension itself fractured into countless shards of glass. In the next moment, the view reappeared, and the null world witnessed as the ground quaked massively. Azragoth smashed into the ground, having fallen from the sky, carving out an unending abyss, and it all fell silent. But the hands descending from the sky didn't halt, not even for a second. They were like a divine decree never to be taken back, and only fell faster and faster toward the abyss. A powerful roar boomed from beneath the abyss as a meteor-like object erupted upward, colliding against the massive arms. Kaboom! 8 arms against 2 gigantic palms, and Azragoth pushed with all his power. The palms pressed against his, forcing him down further, crushing on top of Azragoth's head, bending him downward until they pinned him against his own spine, and yet they continued to push down. He resisted with every ounce of brute force within him, and finally managed to slow down the palms. When he did, he backed off a kilometer, all 8 arms clenching into fists, and once more he burst out. The sound of his crashing fists echoed like thunder as millions of phantom punches appeared from how fast Azragoth was striking. The blows gathered into a tsunami of red energy that blasted apart all the destructive layers of the descending arms before him. But he didn't stop just yet. He roared in fury, drawing in more power before driving out one last punch that unleashed a circular shockwave, tearing through the domain. Then, in an instant, that force was released upward toward Ryuk's colossal arms. The massive arms quaked violently, unable to contain the raging energy. The power was enough to overload every single cell within them, and in the next instant, it exploded. A powerful shockwave of energy and flesh burst forth, strong enough to blow apart the entire army of Azragoth, who had been standing immobile at the side. Ryuk's colossal body jerked back from the force as he looked down at his arms, finding nothing. He had lost both hands, yet it only brought a massive grin to his maws. "Good, good." His voice boomed out as Azragoth stepped out of the abyss, only to be faced with an unbelievable scene. Ryuk raised his massive leg, white flames and destructive energy coalescing around it. Beneath the soles of his feet, the palms opened up, and his nanoparticles rippled, birthing forth a single thrust. Boom! A pillar of destructive energy burst furiously out from the thrust, slamming into Azragoth and sending him plummeting back into the abyss. But that was only the beginning. Kaboom! The entire Nullic world was forced farther down as Ryuk's foot slammed down from the heavens. It was said that the legs held twice the power of the arms, and that was true. When the foot smashed against him, he resisted with all 8 arms, furiously pushing back against it. The sound of bones creaking echoed out, followed soon by the sharp crack of them shattering into nothing. Azragoth was forced deep into the abyss as 4 of his arms were crushed to a bloody pulp, leaving only 4 remaining. A roar of defiance escaped his lips as crimson light exploded out of his body, renewing it with extra vigor. From his back, the phantoms of another 2 massive hands appeared, roughly pushing back against the destructive wave of energy and Ryuk's foot. One more arm burst out from behind him, followed by the phantom of an axe, which the arm gripped tight. Azragoth roared out as the phantom hand cleaved the axe forward, sending out a crimson arc. It ripped through the muzzle beneath Ryuk's soul, dividing it into 2 while the strike continued up Ryuk's leg, exploding at his ankles. Kaboom! Another thunderous explosion rang out as the legs exploded into a shower of energy and nanoparticles, knees colliding with the ground as Azragoth fell to both knees. Cracks didn't just cover his remaining forearms. They spread across the rest of his body as well, his energy bleeding out from every fracture. It was clear. He was exhausted, having unleashed explosive bursts of energy again and again to counter the being above him. But Ryuk wasn't done. Hey hey hey! A wicked cackle left his lips as he recklessly raised his last leg. Instead of 1 muzzle, 2 formed beneath the sole of his foot this time, and even by his ankles, another 4 thrusts rapidly formed. They extended outward, their mouths turning downward, and right then, boom! All 6 muzzles burst forth with energy, and a total of 6 destructive pillars of power slammed into the kneeling Asgard. It pinned his head down, yet he snarled in defiance. Teeth clenched hard, he forced his head up, just in time to see an object inches from his eyes. Instantly, they widened in disbelief. Ho! That word hadn't even finished when his head was ripped through by a nail-like end, tearing through his eyes and skull and nailing him into the abyss. Ryuk's foot had transformed. The 2 muzzles beneath his sole had disappeared, replaced by a massive, nail-like projection. Azragor had seen the hands and feet fall slowly the entire time and thought the feet would come for him at a steady pace. But unknown to him, that was just Ryuk trying to overwhelm his soul with horror of power far beyond him. Once he noticed Azragoth was out of breath, he moved to end it. In the brief span it took for Azragoth to raise his head after being forced down, Ryuk had already gathered energy into the soles of his feet, converting it into something deadlier. Like that, the 5th calamity, Azragoth, the mighty brute, was nailed straight through his head, brains skewered into mush. The moment the world fell silent, it was awoken by the sound of something tearing out, and the source was from Ryuk himself. Right from beneath his chest, a smooth line appeared, and soon, it was ripped open as a figure tore out. Ryuk, but a much, much smaller form of himself, just 3 meters tall. The second he stepped out, the ginormous Ryuk behind him faded into nothing as if he had never existed, leaving just one Ryuk, and he took a step forward, blinking to the depths of the abyss. He tore off Azragoth from the nail that had pierced through his head before holding him up. The calamity, surprisingly, had yet to die, even with a gigantic hole through his face. One of his eyes that had survived being skewered through, though dangling with a piece of flesh, looked at Ryuk, and there was nothing but disbelief in it. He had been defeated? But not just defeated, he was defeated with pure brute force and explosive power, something he believed that, apart from the god races, he was unrivaled at. But then, 10 seconds after, the disbelief in his eyes changed, and Ryuk noticed them turning softer. They were the eyes of one who had come to terms with fate. I. The words echoed directly in Ryuk's mind. I take it back. I take all back. Those were Azragotha's last words before Ryuk's hands forcefully jerked upward. The massive head was ripped off the body, which fell from the sky. Red-crimson blood poured from the sky like a sea as Ryuk held Azragotha's head without much change in expression. He stretched a hand to his falling muscular body, and immediately it disappeared, stored away by him. Then he took a couple of steps forward, rolling the head in his grasp around in a circle before. A comet blazed across the Nullic sky, but it was no comet. It was the head of one of their most respected, powerful calamities, and it slammed into a less populated larvae side of the Null domain, dragging for hundreds of thousands of miles before coming to a stop. Devil Lord Azragoth has fallen? Even though the massive head lay right before them, the Nulls still couldn't believe it. Azragoth wasn't just strong. He was a devilish warlord. Battle and wars were what he excelled at, and even among the calamities, he was said to possess enough combat power to rival the untouchable three calamities. Yet here he was, with only his head remaining, and even that was incomplete, bearing a gigantic hole blown clean through it. When they turned their heads to look back at the figure hovering in the sky, only now did the realization set in. A realization that brought fear. A true calamity had descended upon them. With Azragoth's death, Ryuk didn't continue into the city. He returned to the mountain where he had first perched, his form immediately transforming back to his Beyonder dragon form, and then he curled atop, closing his eyes. Even though he had sensed the other various powers that were awakening within the depths of the Nulls, he wanted them here to step forward toward him with all their belief and courage, only to all be crushingly defeated with their entire armies massacred. That way, it wouldn't be that death had found them. It would be that they had willfully walked right into death and hence become prey to it. Do not go and meet with him, Marionette. The words echoed calmly through a Nullic street. A lady with exceptionally long dark hair that fell over her for meters behind her stopped in her tracks as she turned to find a creature hovering behind her. It was a humano-Nullic creature, its single eye covered in runes, that cast a slight glow upon her face. A face covered in strings that seemed to hold the flesh together. An emissary of the ancient devils? The lady replied in her tiny, infant-like voice as the creature bowed slightly, hand to his chest. The ancient devils do not want you to go meet with him, the son of Thaithvorgoth, as Devil Lord Azragoth has just fallen. It said, but there was no change in the expression of the woman upon hearing the news. They fear for you being killed. The son of Thaithvorgoth is perched upon a mountain and not dealing any destruction upon the realm. But they fear that if he laid hands upon your strings, he may be able to take over the minds of billions of Nulls across the universe. Such an amount of power could push the race to its end. Hence, they have requested your retreat, he relayed, and right then, she turned her back and continued to walk, uttering no reply. Forgive me, the Humano-Null said, but I have orders to stop you if you... It was still speaking when, in the next moment, the sound of a string ringing out echoed, and the creature suddenly had his own hands held the side of his head. On more ringing and it suddenly twisted its own head, up to a complete 360-degree turn like a broken doll, wrenching it off its spine. It collapsed onto the ground a second later, all signs of life fading from it. The background faded as the sound of resuming steps echoed again and again before it faded off completely. Sniffle. Heavy sniffing left Ryuk's massive nostrils, and one of his eyes opened, a silent growl leaving his throat. He uncurled himself from the mountain and stared ahead, sensing the approach of something. But then his eyebrows knitted tightly. He had expected another army next, but there was none. Only a single silhouette could be seen. It stepped forward continuously until it was but a couple of kilometers away. Now Ryuk could see her clearly. It was a being like he had never seen. He didn't even know whether she could be termed as a being or not, as she didn't even seem real. She appeared to be a humanoid doll, joints held together by strings, the same for her skin, and her skin was unnaturally pale white, which couldn't belong to a living being. Her eyes were droopy and dark, devoid of light or emotion. But she was no ordinary being, as taking a sniff of her, Ryuk felt it. There was something of his that was possessed by this doll of a lady. You have something that belongs to me? Ryuk said, looking at the doll-like lady. She stopped when she was a meter away from the mountain, and in response to his words, her hands, which had been held together, parted slightly, leading to the appearance of strange violet-colored strings. They appeared at the edge of her fingers, merging from one finger to another. You're right, she said, turning from her strings to Ryuk, whose eyes quivered in slight confusion. Strings? Which part of me is a string? Where is your army? The dragon asked, as Marionette watched him descend from the mountain. He landed upon the ground, shaking it with might, but she did not tumble. I have not come to fight, only to ask some questions. The mannerism, the tiny childlike words, her innocent doll-like appearance, all reminded Ryuk of one thing Evander had said the first time he had met him. Oh please, I assure you, unlike the rest of the nulls, my queen is more civil and above such things as brutish and barbaric fighting. Nulls are the incarnate of destruction, and he could never believe such words, especially for one named a Calamity. Still, it made his claws hesitate to cleave through her immediately, and he asked, "What do you wish to ask?" She turned away, looking at the strings on her fingers. "If you had the power to control billions of nulls, forcing them to do what you want," she said, as Ryuk's eyebrow creased at the bizarre question. "What will you do with that power?" she asked, and a second had yet even to pass when Ryuk uttered, "I'll be taking control of your mind first, then ask you to detonate yourself," he said, and she replied right after, "And after I detonate myself? Then, I'll take over the minds of the remaining 5 calamities and give them death, in one horrible way after another. And then, I'll gain control of the minds of those who know a thing or two about the Null Dragon War, and learn everything that happened. And then, I'll get rid of every Null who in one way or another is responsible for bringing forth that war. And then, I'll ignore the power until there is another chaos or destruction-hungry Null to get rid of," he said with a finality to his tone as Marionette quieted down. "So, you'll destroy those who you believe have wronged you in one way or another." "Not those I believe," Ryuk growled out. "It is those who did. What about the innocent? The other billions who have no clue about it all? You hate all nulls, don't you? If I hated all nulls in general, you wouldn't find me perched on a mountain doing nothing. Most likely, half of your population would have been wiped out," Ryuk said. "Some nulls deserve death, including you," he said, pointing a claw down at her. "And I'll be serving it. Everyone else can go burn in hell, and I wouldn't blink." Marionette looked at the dragon. He had not given his words thought before uttering them, making them come directly as what they truly were. She looked into his eyes, those rage burning as red flames. "You are filled with too much rage. Sooner or later, it will burn you out, leaving you nothing but an empty husk," she whispered, as Ryuk grinned instead. "Before I become an empty husk, you all would be ashes first. It is not a fair price. We're cursed to all turn to ashes soon enough anyway," she whispered, something that made Ryuk's eyebrows furrow. But she did not say any more. Instead, she turned her back to him, and he watched as the strings that held the gown behind her back slid open, making them slide down. It revealed her back, displaying a vertical line from her neck to her waist, which was held by a string. The string loosened, revealing a spine-like bone approximately 5 centimeters long, shining with a violet hue. What was more, on every side of the bones were strings that he noticed reached out to the paths of her skin, almost like a power source that held her together. "What I have is your nervous system, which possesses the power to take control of the minds of all nulls it bonds with. Take it, but remember your own words," she said, as Ryuk's claw reached forward towards the spine. He was just a few inches away from grabbing the bone when suddenly his hands moved, and he grabbed her by the shoulders instead. The air flapped heavily, and Marionette watched herself furiously jerked back. Her eyes looked forward, and she saw it. A blade as dark as night crept out of the void, reaching for her neck. It moved very fast and silently like a viper, yet it also came too late as she was pulled back, making the blade miss by an inch. She appeared by his side, a glint in her eyes, as her hands held her throat. She had been saved. She turned to the side, staring in disbelief at Ryuk, but his eyes were focused forward. The blade vanished back into the void, and then a door of pitch darkness appeared before both as he stepped out. A knight of darkness, holding a humongous sword of darkness. Marionette Nullite, you have disobeyed the orders of the ancient devils to not appear before the son of Thaith Vorgoth and betrayed us, Nulls. The punishment for your atrociousness is death, the knight said, and Marionette replied, I am already dead, just not by your blade. Now Ryuk understood. The stringed bone of his was what held her together, truly like a power source of some sort. If it were taken, the strings disappear and naturally she dies. How bizarre a null, he muttered to himself, and in the next moment, his hands reached to the side. A dark rift opened up, and Marionette was thrown within, devoured by the darkness as the rift closed up and disappeared. Only after did Ryuk turn his attention to the dark knight before him. You have something of mine. In response, the knight raised his dark swords. A cyclone of darkness rushed into the sky, conjuring forth a massive dark shadow rift. From the depths of it, they began descending. Shadow Knights, different races, ranging from titans to centaurs, each holding its own unique weapon. They covered everywhere, numbering in the thousands, and casting a shadow upon Ryuk. Then, his humongous dark sword turned to Ryuk, uttering in a voice cold and firm, I am Achilles, the Knight of Death, and I'll be offering you the gift of death. So this is the fourth calamity, huh? Talk about being on a different level. Ryuk mused beneath his breath as he looked at the shadowed knight before him. He radiated no aura, save for the thick shadows that surrounded him. But what truly made Ryuk know he was powerful was his army. The weakest among them stood at the Apocrypha stage, and they numbered in the thousands. There were a great number also at the Exygnus stage, and Ryuk sensed about 400 of them. Imagine 1,000 Apocrypha stage beings, along with 400 Exygnus-level beings, descending upon a planet. Could such a planet ever resist invasion? Even Amamura would be overtaken in mere minutes, and most likely erased in an hour. With Achilles' hand raised, sword pointed forward towards Ryuk, he uttered a single command, Devour! Powerful roars and howls exploded outward toward Ryuk, the shockwave alone forcing him backward. But that was only the beginning. Like a storm given form, Achilles was already charging forward at the head of his own shadow army. This is it, Ryuk muttered, a ferocious glint in his eyes. Finally, a worthy opponent. He threw his head back and a thunderous draconic roar drowned out every sound on the battlefield. A pillar of blazing golden energy shot into the air from a rune right on top of the wide draconic forehead, erasing the gloomy skies of the null. Then, the radiant energy slammed back down like meteors, this time divided into 12, and striking various areas of the battlefield. When the light finally faded, 12 powerful roars echoed out as 12 colossal dragons emerged from the golden light, surrounding the advancing army. They paused from the encirclement yet reacted immediately as they divided, running towards each dragon. Like blades of light, the various draconic Ryuks tore through the army, a violent collision of forces erupting across the battlefield. From above, a shadowy being slipped out of the void. Achilles had reached him, his hefty shadow sword raised high, its edge pointed downwards. Achilles' misery, Evergon death strike. A simple downward stab, yet the monumental power it carried cracked the earth beneath Ryuk's feet, opening a vast abyss. It was not destroyed by force but by absolute corrosion. Ryuk's entire body turned pitch black before he could even move a single muscle, paralyzed instantly, and when the sword finally pierced through the center of his head, his massive draconic body disintegrated into stone dust as Achilles dropped down into the abyss, his gigantic dark sword stabbing into the ground. But once more he was gone, already a shadow, reappearing in an instant before one of the draconic Ryuk on the battlefield. Achilles cleaved forward another arc of death, reducing another of Ryuk's draconic forms to ash. And once more he was already gone. 10 seconds. That was all it took for all 13 of Ryuk's draconic images to be erased. Yet 10 seconds was also all it took for the 12 Draconic Ryuks to bring down 300 Apocrypha stage Shadow Devils and erase 99 Exignis stage Shadow Devils. Massive shadowed bodies lay cleaved open across the ground. Claw marks seared into them like scars of daylight, piled high like a mountain of death. In mere moments, the battlefield had become an abyss. But it all seemed to have ended with no more Ryuks. But then, Akailes hummed beneath his breath. "I sense you." The words left the knight's throat as he lifted his gaze to the cleared sky, still holding motes of gold. But no more words followed. Instead, Achilles raised his sword, clenching it tight within his grasp, while his other hand formed a seal. Knight of Darkness. In the next moment, a 3,000-meter-tall gigantic phantom of a dark knight appeared behind him, clutching an equally massive sword. Dimensional ends cleave. He swung forward, and the phantom mirrored his strike. The air split apart as the blade extended into space, its edge suddenly disappearing for a fleeting moment as if it had escaped this reality. The sound of something shattering suddenly echoed out. The massive sword exploded into shards of darkness, and in the instant that followed, Achilles vanished from where he stood. A heartbeat later, a scorching beam of destructive light crashed into the ground where he had been, slicing straight through his army and erasing them to nothing. He rose to his feet and turned upward. There stood Ryuk. But this time he was absolutely different. Beyond magnificent. It wasn't flesh, nor was it draconic scales. If there was a word that came to Achilles' mind, it was machine, but that wasn't entirely true. It was something in between everything, something higher, a masterpiece of engineered beauty. Sleek, radiant, and terrifyingly flawless. Achilles' shadowed eyes easily pierced through that metallic form, witnessing seams of nanoscopic particles shifting and reassembling like living armor. Between those plates pulsed rivers of soft blue light, tracing along his body like constellations. Each pulse released ripples of energy that wove into the surrounding space. Unlike his previous draconic body, which was chaos incarnate, this new form was control itself. Broad-chested yet sculpted with stream-like precision, muscles defined by rippling plates of titanium white, outlined by flowing golden filaments that pulsed with a hidden rhythm. His long, regal arms hung at his sides, their surfaces layered with elegant armor lines. Right now, his right palm was held outwards, with a glowing nanonozzle shimmering faintly with remnants of destructive energy. It was what had not only destroyed his phantom but also wiped out a vertical line of his army. He turned his head downward, eyes settling on Achilles. The first thing noticeable was the two golden horns crowning his head, smooth, curved, and humming faintly with power. Thin streams of electric light ran along their edges, forming runic codes that flickered in and out of existence. His hair was short, metallic white, streaked with faint motes of gold. This was Ryuk's new Anunnaki form. An already peak racial technological form further evolved down to the deepest cell by an evolution card. "Sorry to have kept you waiting," Ryuk said. His voice wasn't speech. His lips did not even move an inch. It was like data being sent straight into Achilles' own mind. And then he vanished,